The topic is sustainability, and my guest today is Paulette Frank. She is Worldwide Vice President of Environmental Health, Safety, and Sustainability with Johnson & Johnson. Paulette, welcome.
Thank you.
For that small percentage of the population that maybe doesn't know that much about J&J, would you tell me a little bit about the company?
Sure. So Johnson & Johnson is the largest, most broadly based healthcare company in the world. For over 130 years, we've been bringing innovative healthcare products to patients and consumers. We operate on all continents, over 135,000 employees, and typically we touch 1 billion people every day, typically at very vulnerable points in their life, whether having a baby or having perhaps a sports injury or perhaps fighting a grave illness.
Okay, so why are you at this Gartner conference? What about it subject-wise interests you and brings you?
Well, we were actually invited to come to the conference this week and share an environmental sustainability story. It's a project that we started about a decade ago called Project Phoenix. Mm-hmm. And the focus of the project is to work with the informal waste sector, which are essentially cooperatives of waste recyclers in emerging markets. In this case, we worked in Brazil with a recycling cooperative. And the focus of the work is to bring their working conditions and their operating conditions to a standard where they can be a reliable, high-quality supplier in our supply chain.
That sounds like an enormous task. Huge challenge, right?
It is. It can be challenging, but it starts with working with the people at the cooperative, helping them with basic things like literacy, reading and writing, computer skills, looking at the flow of the materials through their operation and helping them create some efficiency with how material flows through their operation. The result is better working conditions, safer working conditions for the people at the cooperative, higher productivity, and higher quality product coming out at the end. And the goal of the project is it starts out where we are investing in the capacity, building the capacity of this particular supplier in our supply chain. But the goal is to really become a customer, right? To be a customer, to create the demand for their products so that it's a self-sustaining model.
How do you execute on this? Do you have people on the ground in each of these countries, your own J&J people? Do you task people outside your organization who specialize in this type of thing? Just how do you carry it forward?
You have to create an ecosystem of partners that help you bring this kind of thing to life. We certainly have local people within J&J who support the cooperative. Certainly our procurement organization in Brazil supports the cooperative by directing our supplier of packaging material to buy the post-consumer recycled content from the cooperative. And then we also work with local social workers and NGOs who help actually build that capacity on the ground.
Yeah, a lot of them are already there and they're already kind of monitoring the situation, so it seems like natural to tap into their expertise as well. Of course, they're also looking over your shoulder, making sure that you're doing a good job at it, right? Yeah, so I mean, but your own people, I mean, do you have, how many people from your own organization do you task around the world in this effort?
So right now we have been working primarily in Brazil. Mm-hmm. 2 years ago we tried to bring the model to India, and we learned a lot about how the local context matters a lot. You can't necessarily get the same job done in the same way. Mm-hmm. In a different cultural setting, different waste policies that support the informal sector in Brazil that are different in India. So we have, really it's not any one person or a number of people that are dedicated to this particular effort. It's part of a procurement person's role in Brazil to make sure that the supply is coming in through the supply chain. We have a person in our corporate headquarters who makes sure that the NGOs and the social workers are getting the resources that they need from us to get their part of the project done. Mm-hmm. So it's not a tremendous lift, really, from a people perspective. It's really about mobilizing all the players along that value chain to play the role that will sustain the project.
But it also sounds like you're attempting to enable cultural and societal changes within those countries that would then kind of trickle down into the way these jobs are done. You're going far beyond just the workplace, how much someone is paid and what they're doing, if you're talking about education and the like. That seems to me to be the biggest challenge.
Well, doing it at scale is the biggest challenge, and that's actually one of the key goals we had in bringing this story to Gartner this week, was to expose the model to more companies. 2 years ago, we helped set up a nonprofit to actually try to scale this model and bring in more companies, more resources, so that we could reach even more cooperatives. So far, we've been able to reach 2 on our own in Brazil. It's called iWork. It's the Inclusive Recycling Waste Coalition. iWork.world if companies are interested in joining the coalition. But we believe that bringing companies together to pool our resources to try to scale this model is really the thing that's going to unlock the impact at scale.
It certainly sounds like a long-term commitment that you're making. What kind of a timetable would you hope, in the best possible scenario, that you would start to achieve some real change and real results from this effort?
I think it can be done relatively quickly. We can bring more companies and more resources that can reach more cooperatives. I mean, we've done the fast failing on the model. We've learned a lot. We've iterated, and some of our expectations in the beginning were set quite high in terms of the standard of the operating conditions we were shooting for. If you're familiar with SA 8000, it's a social accountability standard for working conditions, so things like working hours, wages, employment of young persons. It's a very high bar from a labor practices perspective and a workplace safety perspective. And initially our goal was for the co-op to get certified to the SA 8000 standard, which again, it's a very, very high bar. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we had to adjust was that expectation of certification was so high that it was actually preventing us from getting access to more cooperatives that could actually meet the expectation. So we were kind of striving for perfection, and it was preventing progress. So we actually worked with the SA 8000 organization and came up with a maturity ladder, and where along that maturity ladder to that very high standard is really good enough for a waste cooperative type of operation. Kind of set the bar there and work with the cooperatives to reach that. So kind of adjusting that standard, I think, will also help bring more cooperatives to the table, enable them to see how they can get there. But really, it's just a matter of companies who, if they want to bring post-consumer recycled content into their products and packaging, and they want to do this in an emerging market like Brazil, this is the model that can work, but we just need to pool our resources so that we can get the scale. We're not going to get there as fast as we'd like to one-on-one.
But you are going to provide a model for others to follow and adopt.
Absolutely, that's the whole point.
You're blazing a trail, so to speak, that others can...
And there have been other companies that have been blazing this trail as well, and there is now a desire, instead of each of us doing it on our own, kind of coming together and pooling our resources so that we can have an even bigger impact.
Certainly makes sense. Why does J&J care about environmental sustainability?
Well, we care on a very practical level. To run a business in the 21st century, you have to run it within the constraints of the natural world. There's been a report every 2 years. It's called the Living Planet Report. It's put out by the Global Footprint Network. And for the past decade that I've been following the report, it's been saying pretty much the same thing, that we are consuming natural resources faster than the natural environment can replenish those resources, and the trajectory of that is by 2030 we will need 2 planet Earths to sustain our current consumption as a worldwide society. Last time I looked, we have 1. We have 1 planet Earth, so we say we have to operate within a 1 planet budget. So that's at a very practical level. At a more aspirational level, we aspire to change the trajectory of health for humanity, and we know that we can't do that without a healthy planet. Healthy people need a healthy planet. This project kind of falls into both, right? There's a very practical element of it. We would like to use post-consumer recycled content in our packaging. We feel as though this is the way to get high quality, reliable supply of post-consumer recycled content and also, these people who work in these cooperatives are doing an environmental service and a public service for the communities in which they work, taking waste off the streets that otherwise would end up perhaps in waterways and into the environment, and they're removing that and they're putting it back into some sort of valuable production into the supply chain.
Well, a company with the size and reach of Johnson & Johnson, you certainly are in a position to make a difference. So Paulette, thank you very much for telling your story on environmental sustainability at Johnson & Johnson. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
I've been talking to Paulette Frank of Johnson & Johnson. Thank you very much for watching.